I'm your host, Maddie Stover, a doctoral student in physics here at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
And I'm Steve Nesbitt, head of the Department of Climate, Meteorology, and Atmospheric Sciences here at the University of Illinois. Our Illinois listeners will be very familiar with today's guest, Tim Killeen, from his time as the president of the University of Illinois System. But what you may not know is that he's also a geophysicist with a long storied scientific career and is also a faculty member in our department. From 1987 to 2000, he was a professor in the Department of Atmospheric, Oceanic, and Space Sciences at the University of Michigan. He was also the director of the National Center for Atmospheric Research, which we'll talk about today, from 2000 to 2008.
Joining us to talk about his research in atmospheric science and his plans after stepping down as president of the University of Illinois, and a little bit of his thoughts about the current state of climate science in the United States, is President Tim Killeen. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Oh, very welcome. Nice to see you, Maddie.
So we'll go a little bit into your expertise here. So your specialty in atmospheric science is in the upper parts of the atmosphere. We've had interviews on campus here about space weather. So can you tell a little bit about what your research was in space weather and why it's important to the average person?
Okay. Well, maybe a little history of how I got there. I did a PhD in physics, actually particle physics. Couldn't get a job, the next obvious job, but down the corridor there was a group that was working in space physics and doing sounding rocket experiments in the auroral regions in the northern hemisphere. So I did that for a while. That hooked me on space science, particularly on space physics, but generally the upper atmosphere, the ionosphere, magnetosphere, the solar environment and the planets as well. I just felt that was, enthralling kind of subject, and you can relate it all to planet Earth, which is the platform for all of life. So it seemed like a wonderful field to get into. I was a postdoc in the United Kingdom, and a professor came to see what I was doing and with sounding rockets, and said, well, if you do that with sounding rockets, we would like you to try doing it on a NASA spacecraft mission to the upper atmosphere, to the thermosphere at the time. That I thought was a very exciting opportunity. So I came, and I didn't think it was going to be more than about 18 months max, but here I am all these many years later as University of Illinois president. And what we did there was we made some of the first measurements of the global dynamical wind field in the upper atmosphere, the region where satellites, low Earth orbiting satellites fly, so directly relevant to performance of satellites, how long they reside, how quickly they come back down because of satellite drag, but also a region of the near-Earth environment where you can get significant disturbances from solar storms that can affect everything from GPS to trajectory mapping of satellites. There are obviously national security implications, but also really pragmatic implications of will our electrical grid hold up if there's a major storm from the sun? If it's coming our way, how can we predict it, etc. So there are very practical reasons that you want, with a highly technological, digitally oriented society where we all depend a lot on digital devices of all kinds and information retrieval, etc. Space sciences and space physics directly affects the robustness of that societal system. So it's got direct consequences. And there have been occasions in the past where, the state of Quebec was shut down because of a solar storm, and things that I'm sure you talk about in class sometimes. But it's fascinating as well. And it also has implications for the long-term habitability of the planet because of the way planets, either conserve or lose their water, which is essential for life. So I always felt that was significant. But for that, you have to think about very long time frames, like billions and billions of years, rather than what might happen next week. So it had all the allure, intellectual allure, but also the practical implications. But flying spacecraft on rockets for a young person is pretty exciting. The countdown goes like this: 10, 9, 8, boom, and then it goes up, and you think, will that gadget that I just spent years working on survive the shaking of the launch. So it had all of that sort of drama and excitement as well as everything else. So it was a good profession, a good research arena to be in, and those kind of experimental skills, and then the observational skills, the data analytical skills, led to theoretical work as well on supercomputers, where you try to understand what you're seeing. You got through the evidence of remote sensing, etc. And so I became the director of the Space Physics Research Lab at University of Michigan, and we had satellite missions to Venus and Mars and Jupiter and so forth. And we were on Cassini, which flew through the rings of Saturn and then took a picture looking back towards the sun. Very exciting stuff. So I can't complain about my career at all. So.
And what are some projects in the current state of the field? What are some space weather projects that you'd love to see get funded?
Well, I think there's a lot of more international participation right now in the satellite arena. Obviously, these networks of fleets of satellites that do radio telecommunications, etc., are populating the region that I was studying in. So I think the stability of that is really, really important. The future role of satellite communications with quantum is going to be something that I think is really coming of age very quickly. As you know, the University of Illinois is working in quantum computing, and part of the rationale for that is quantum computers can very quickly de-encrypt things, and they can do calculations of very complex geophysical situations and give results very quickly. But the ability to do that anywhere in the world is going to rely on satellite-to-satellite communications rather than ground-based fiber optics necessarily. So that's, I think, an important arena where I really would like to see University of Illinois play a leading role as well in not just quantum computing, quantum communications, quantum sensing, and connect it with the sort of ethical guidelines, frankly, that are needed for these kind of new technologies coming to play. And I think the role of a university like ours, where you have all of the intersecting disciplines, is really important, because big industry have their own rationales, governments have their own rationales, but I think we have the intellectual capacity to take some leadership role for that. So I think the space arena is going to be very vibrant, because we're depending on it more and more technologically. I hope it never comes to pass that there's kind of conflict in the space environment, that it still becomes, remains a place of stability and equanimity and peace, so that satellites don't get shot out of the sky. So it's been that way for now, but I think we need to be cautious about the advance of technology in all of these fronts. My own field has been in remote sensing. So in fact, I've got a satellite in orbit as we speak, operating as we speak, with 4 telescopes. At least it was last time I looked, which was about a month ago, so I hope it hasn't been turned off. It's been up there for about 22 years, and it's measuring the composition, wind, and temperature structure of what we call the mesosphere and lower thermosphere, which is a little bit lower than my original work, a little higher than weather work, but in that intermediate part of the atmosphere, too high for balloons and too low for satellites. So we used to jocularly call it the ignorosphere, because it was very hard to make direct in situ measurements. So the satellite that's up there now is making those observations. And those are important observations too, to really fully understand the dynamics and the structure of the planet that we live on. So I'm not sure if that directly answers your question, but a little bit.
Yeah, that definitely gives us a good sense of where the field is going. That's interesting, because I do a lot of communications work for our quantum center here, IQuest. Have a lot of friends who work in quantum computing, but I've never heard any discussion of the physics around the satellites, which is going to be very important for quantum communication. When we hear quantum, we immediately think quantum computing, but quantum sensing, quantum networks, we're really going to see those appear before quantum computers come into the market.
I think so. Quantum communications is already underway, in many places, and that's just the beginning. And we're doing pioneering work right here, as IQUIST, as you mentioned, is doing that kind of work. And I think even with satellite experiments as well, with Paul Quatt actively engaged in that and his team. So that's very exciting work. Yeah. So the combination of these things, I've always been somebody who likes the sort of interdisciplinary span, so I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just an experimentalist working on optical remote sensing, high spec. I wanted to be as well a theoretical expert so I could understand what was happening and why it was happening, and then a modeling and a data scientist as well. And I think, into the future, those kinds of convergent skill sets are going to be very important, where you can connect, say, environmental stresses with healthcare stresses, and you can then use AI and computational techniques to really pull out things that are meaningful and helpful for human health, as well as many of these other challenges we face. So I think the role of technology and multidisciplinary transformative work is going to be important in the future, but we need to always have an eye on the human consequences and aspects of that, how decisions are made under risk and uncertainty and so forth, and really get the evidence that's needed to create the kind of decisional capacity that we need, that our kids need, our grandkids need, right into the future.
So this kind of leads us into another very important interdisciplinary center in the U.S. Steve, if you want to intro NCAR a little bit.
Yeah, so as Tim's very familiar with, our field relies on NCAR as sort of the beehive of activity for many things, from theory, models, societal applications, and workforce development even. So really the NCAR, which you were the director of from 2000 to 2008, is a very important center that ties together a lot of different parts of our field. In a nutshell, can you describe NCAR and why it's important to the United States?
Yeah, so NCAR was formed to support universities across the country that had atmospheric science departments and were unable to each instrument themselves adequately to take on the really tricky nonlinear problems. So NCAR was created in the early 60s, that time frame. As a place that would develop the kind of leading edge facilities that all of these universities could tap into and take advantage of. I think it's now over 100 and maybe even 120 universities who are members of the NCAR-UCAR system. So it was created for multidisciplinary work, the kind of work I was just talking about, to provide one-of-a-kind facilities that would be too expensive for individual universities to manage and to support. So NCAR did become the beehive. I think that's it became the place where you could develop high-performance nonlinear models of the Earth system in all of its complexity. Earth, biosphere, atmosphere, oceans, etc., and really build the capabilities there in support of the university community. And the professors at all these universities, and University of Illinois was a founding university for NCAR, one of the original founders, and benefited from that enormously in terms of access to facilities that were then managed on behalf of the whole national community, with a free and open opportunity. Now, it was funded by NSF, so an investigator would have to write a proposal to NSF to get access to the NCAR facilities, and that's how it operated, and very effective in terms of building that capacity, and really state-of-the-art, world-leading knowledge base for not just computation, but radar observations, satellite observations, balloon observations, global observations of extreme weather impact events, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. NCAR developed some of the really important technologies that enabled weather forecasting to be as good as it is these days. Now, people laugh about weather forecasting not being perfect, but the precision of the forecasts have increased over decades to a point where we all rely on them, and industry relies on them, transportation relies on them, etc. All of that has been driven by the fact that the whole national community said we need to have a place that can deliver the world-class facilities that we all need, and it's got to be accessible to all. That's been a very, very successful model in this arena of, I would say, space science as well. I mean, pioneering work was done on sunspots and on coronal physics and on solar storms. Pioneering work on wildfires, handheld devices that can help a firefighter out in the field know what might happen in terms of maybe it could be an outbreak to the left or to the right or something. So I mean, it's life-saving capabilities. And then many thousands of young investigators coming through and going back and teaching their students, in those universities. So it's been a huge success story, I think, for U.S. science, and it's put the U.S. at the forefront of the knowledge about how the metabolism of planet Earth interacts and why it is the way it is, how weather works to move surplus energy to deficit energy regions, what's happening in the Earth's oceans, etc. So it's I often think that the Greeks had it right. The word geology is earth wisdom, right? Geo logos. I think so. We need wisdom about this is the one planet that supports all of our lives, right? Our livelihoods, etc. So we need to understand it as best we can. NCAR's been at the cutting edge of that for decades, and so I think it's a very important nodal location, and of course it's internationally renowned. Internationally, I mean, you go anywhere, you will find NCAR is acknowledged. So I was honored to be the director there for 8 years. We built new supercomputers, IBM machines, etc. We kept the pace with the evolving technologies. We participated in lots of major studies of extreme weather events and climate change and oceanic change, wildfires, droughts, floods, you name it, and also increasingly the human dimensions of that. How does society make decisions on the basis of that kind of understanding and knowledge? And how will the next generation of weather forecast systems that you dial into, right, every morning probably, how can they be improved and can benefit decision making capacities for society writ large? So it's that important.
Yeah, I mean, weather impacts almost everybody directly, but also our economy. It's in tens of billions of dollars. And
right.
So if we don't have a resilient economy, it can lead to a lot of disruption. And
it's not easy physics, chemistry, or biology because it's a nonlinear system, right? There's chaotic activity and the atmosphere finds ways to move energy around, and everything's intensifying right now. I mean, in my lifetime, the sea surface temperature of the tropical ocean has gone up 1 degree Celsius or more, and that's like a lot of evaporation, a lot of latent energy pumped into the atmosphere. It's got to go somewhere, and so we need to understand, what's going to happen, the likelihood of that, with a degree of precision that can influence good decision making in terms of infrastructure provision, in terms of robustness of transportation networks, buildings. So it's directly relevant to the way our society functions. Yeah.
So, unfortunately, the Trump administration has recently announced its plans to dismantle NCAR. What are your thoughts on current efforts to preserve the center, and do you think they'll be successful?
That's a question, a timely question. There is a move to dismantle, is the word used by OMB, the Office of Management Budget, in the Trump administration, and it's not clear to me yet which pieces would move and where they would move and how it would function. So the optimist in me says this is not necessarily a closing of the scientific capabilities of the United States in this important arena that's only gaining in importance. institutions do need to evolve, so I'm open-minded to, it could be made better, etc. But I have written letters detailing how the contributions, why the contributions are important, and how they're not just in the area of climate change prediction, but in all these other areas that I mentioned a moment ago. So I'm very hopeful that the university community and the business community will kind of look at this and say, well, we need that function. You want to rename it? Maybe, but we need the function to support and you mentioned the workforce development aspects of it too. That's incredibly important. The next generations are going to confront issues and problem sets that we haven't had before. So they need the tool base and the toolkit to be able to understand, to mitigate, to adapt, to be, to create a continually robust society where economic prosperity can be guaranteed for the future of our kids and their kids, etc. That is dependent on knowledge of the environmental stresses that are coming at us, and there are lots of them, and they're going to show up in not linear ways always. So we need a sophisticated understanding of this, and the United States has to stay in the intellectual leadership. Absolutely. It can't become a second tier, third tier to understanding the way in which the planet Earth functions and how it relates to humanity. That's a big kind of question right there.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Weather Realness, the weekly podcast about climate and weather. We are joined by University of Illinois President Tim Killeen to talk about his research in atmospheric science and his thoughts on the current state of climate science in the United States.
So, Tim, following your time at NCAR, you went to National Science Foundation in Washington,
yes,
and you were the assistant director for geosciences there, obviously a very important funding agency that helps coordinate research at universities and also at NCAR. Recently, NSF has had its own challenges. I have friends that were summarily kicked out of their office with very little notice. The NSF headquarters was switched to a different agency. Why is NSF important and as a bedrock sort of supporting science, and what are your thoughts on the current state of NSF and what it should do next?
Well, NSF is an incredibly important, uniquely important agency for the United States. It created and developed in the post-war years to basically ensure that we were at the cutting edge of new knowledge in all fields: physics, chemistry, biology, etc., social sciences, engineering, and it's performed that job admirably for decades now, leading to many Nobel Prizes, many great discoveries, again, the educational attainments of generations of people. So National Science Foundation, I really honor that agency, and I was there for 4 years, and I was the assistant director for the geosciences, as you mentioned. So we had Earth, ocean, space, we had land masses as well, seismology. So when the Haiti earthquake happened, NSF went into action to ensure that we would be better prepared should there be further earthquakes that could damage buildings and human lives. So it's had, when the oil spill happened, I was there, and it was NSF that went out and actually made the observations that figured out where the oil was coming from, how much was there, and how, in many ways could be cleaned up. So NSF is fundamentally important to the intellectual vitality of the country and the technological capabilities. And I could go on and on and on about computation, engineering. Of course, my arena was the Earth system sciences. And yes, it's going through a patch now that's tricky and difficult. There was the first year led to multiple agencies being directly affected with the new administration, and NSF was not immune from that. I was encouraged to see the budget that was came from Congress and passed by the president had NSF's budget decremented by only a few percent, maybe 3%, which is more of a haircut than a amputation. Now we'll see how that all works through. But again, it's fundamental to the the United States. We have 4.5% of the world's population, so we've got to live off our wits. We've got to be operating at the intellectual cutting edge. And when I first went to NSF, I remember the deputy director there told me, I think he probably told this to everybody, is if you're operating, if your research is at the leading edge, the forward hemisphere is not gray, it's black, because you're really probing the unknown of what is not known yet. So the United States has to do that, because new knowledge is central to future prosperity and future economic development, and all kinds of things flow from that, livelihoods, discernment in decision making. It's all really incredibly important. So again, I'm a fierce proponent of the National Science Foundation and the other scientific agencies, and have worked extensively with them, but with NASA, as I mentioned, with the Department of Energy, NOAA. All of these agencies are really incredibly important to the intellectual vitality, but also the economic competitiveness of the United States. It's derived essentially from our ability to design, to create, to be entrepreneurial, to design, to innovate extensively, and all of that is jeopardized if you kind of unravel things that have proved their worth over time. Now, I'm not, proposing that we don't consider the future carefully. Institutions can evolve; they should evolve. Modern times are different; things are changing rapidly. We're in a period of history where things are changing rapidly. But the National Science Foundation is like bedrock for the competitive positioning of the United States, which we're all vested in. Yeah.
And so we're seeing some changes, potential disruptions to some of these more national scientific agencies. Where does that leave the role in of the university, kind of in this overall scientific enterprise?
That's a question that's very much on my mind, because we have a wonderful university here. It's called the University of Illinois System, 3 universities. We just passed the 100,000 student mark, so we now have 101,000 students. The enrollments have been growing. Research is vibrant and has been growing. Our support from our alumni has been growing too. So that's the question I ask myself almost every day. What is our appointed role in terms of projecting into a healthy future for society? Okay, so we call ourselves, in our university, the public's university. We're of the public. We belong to the public, right? We're a university in a state. We benefit enormously from good alignment with state decision makers and strong public trust and confidence in us. And it's because we've kept our costs down, I believe. We've made our world-class educational opportunities attainable, affordable to the people of Illinois, while also opening doors to people from many other countries. So the vibrancy of the campus is maintained. So the question you're asking is a deeper question. What does this mean into the future? And the way I've been thinking about it is public, private, governmental is kind of like a tripod that is important for designing a future worthy of our kids and their grandkids and our posterity in a way. So with the public sector, the private sector, and the governmental sector, they're three. They sing to different drummers in a way, or if that's mixing metaphors for a musician, I'm sorry. But so what is the role of the public sector, particularly the comprehensive, research-intensive, place-based university system like ours, which is a magnificent institution with wonderful people who collaborate generously, do wonderful things, are very inventive. The teaching is magnificent. So I think we need to lead even more into the future. Lead by helping shape, not by being sort of look at us and send us more money because you have to believe us, right? Those discussions and arguments have to be replaced by, look, we support societal function, and we do it by creating world-class educational that's accessible, can be attained, and it's not so costly that you 41% of our students who graduate don't have any debt. That's a large. It's not quite half, but that's significant. So we want to do good things for society, and I feel like we need to lead more than maybe has been true in the past, because government is always worried about the next election. Big industry is worried about the quarterly, bottom line and the stakeholders, etc. And the U.S. has a special role to play in innovation and inventive that has done for many decades, hundreds of years. So the role of the public, I would say even the land-grant universities, which are rooted and grounded in place, and they were designed to lift society up. So we have to do that really well, and we have to exercise leadership in that too. Quantum is one arena, but we've got to bring the arts and humanities into that arena as well. It's not like you can leave pieces out. And we're one of the few places, these kinds of universities are one of the few places where you can convene expertise across all of the disciplines pertinent and germane to a problem set and attack that problem set with a public good emphasis, right? This is not about fame, fortune, prestige. It's about actually lifting the boats in the harbor. There's another metaphor going off in a direction. But I think leading that's very much on my mind now. How do we lead without, building bonfires of the vanities and, things like, that would be distracting, but substantively important for the times in history in which we're embedded. And I'm very proud of the way we're stepping up to that at the University of Illinois on many, many fronts. And at the same time, I think we've got to work to gain public trust and confidence. There's been an erosion of that in our sector, not so much for us. We do the surveys, we know that's been going in the other direction for the University of Illinois. But there's been nationally an erosion of confidence because of cost, because of a sense of maybe elitism. Now, you can be elite without being elitist. I think that's the way we need to be thinking about excellence, integrity, scale, contributions. Yes, affordability. If it's out of reach for young people, that's a problem for us. That's our responsibility to find ways to make it within reach, right? And then accessible, so that we kind of recognize that not everybody needs exactly the same set of circumstances to succeed, but we've got to be able to bring everybody along, right? So all 101,082 students is the number that we currently have. And we want them all to succeed, and then look back in pride with what they've done, and then go on and change the world for the better. So I think the role of the universities is even more starkly one of leadership. And that kind of intellectual leadership has to come with recognition that you can't do it all in one institution. Even such a thing as NCAR, as well endowed as it's been, cannot do it all. It had to partner. So partnering is incredibly important too. And in partnerships, this is my little own opinion that I'm lumbering you with, but you can't have 300 partnerships and do them all justice. So authentic partnerships where you can roll your sleeves up and say, hey, we think this is important to work on together. Those things can move the dial rapidly. So generous, collaborative partnerships is what we're all about. And doing that through convening, through exemplifying, through role modeling, but with excellence in everything you touch and do, because you don't want to trade off excellence for scale or fame or whatever it happens to be. So it's a very interesting time to be a university president of such a place, to tell you the truth. Yeah, pinch myself every morning, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of led us into another topic that we wanted to discuss, but recently we've seen this kind of public erosion of trust, specifically in the field of science, in the sciences. In 2024, the Pew Research Center reported that public trust in science has yet to return to pre-pandemic levels for some of the reasons that you just cited. What are some of your concerns about the current state of the public's trust in science? And do you maybe have some thoughts on actions that could help kind of heal or ameliorate this relationship?
Yeah, well, I think and I'm writing about this, I think at our university we have, because we make it affordable, accessible, excellent, and then we're rooted in place, time, and contribution to society. That's a great narrative. Now, is the narrative being adequately projected so that people don't hear it? I think we've got to do a better job of, in a sector, in the higher education sector, of recognizing that some of this has been complacency. I won't say the University of Illinois. I think the sector has been a little complacent, where we're so good, you should know it, right? And you should just send us the money or provide the resources. I think that approach is past its day. I think we need to recognize that not everybody needs or wants a 4-year degree. We need to open our throttle and open our aperture so that we're talking more about lifelong learning and participation, and almost like a homeroom where you can keep coming back as your life changes. You move from job to job to job through other kinds of credentials or experiences, and that will be more meaningful to more people. My simple mind says if you can give 2 people a world-class education, that's better than 1 person, right? Okay, so let's open the aperture. Let's not try to be selective and small, and because there's a criticism that comes along with that. This is great for the few who can afford it, but not for me who can't afford it. So we need to recognize that that's a justifiable concern that society has of our sector. And so we need to take some of that responsibility on. I think the path forward will include better projection and showing up in society. I do a road tour of every year of Illinois. We take our leadership team. We go to the deep south of Illinois, Cairo, Illinois. We go community colleges, high schools. We show up. We try to be present in the state where we reside. That's an important piece of it. You can't be sort of standoffish because you're so good. They should all know it, and the tax base should just be there for us. So we've got to acknowledge, I almost say culpability, but at least responsibility for this sector being somewhat tarnished reputationally because of, and I think it more complacency than actual, because substantively the contributions are immense. If you look at the economic impact of the U.S. Higher ed sector, particularly research universities, it's like that's the prosperity of our whole country is built on that, essentially. So there are a couple of things there, I think, and it's not marketing so much as projecting, being present, listening to the stakeholder communities, whether or not they're looking to send a kid to university for a 4-year degree, by recognizing that cost is really important. It's an incredible barrier for families who may have multiple kids, and they look at the sticker price. And so we're working very hard on financial aid on lots of fronts, and we froze tuition for 7 of the last 11 years. Those are the kinds of things so that you have to do to gain trust. So in fact, I've just got an op-ed piece I'm going to put in that talks about the blueprint for regaining that public trust and confidence in our sector. I do think we've got a model here where we are today that is worthy of looking at. It's got the generous collaboration, the partnerships, the affordability, the accessibility, the diversity of type of person in the classrooms, really important. The commitment to excellence, the recognition that public good is not just a word, it's something you've got to do every day in some fashion in public service. So those are the kinds of things that I think incumbent upon us in higher education to really exemplify, recognizing that we're not where we need to be. And as Chancellor Isbell here points out, this is not something that's suddenly happened. There's been an erosion over decades, and maybe it's come to the fore in the last year or two. But we need to be thinking and planning long-term as well as just answering the initial, onslaught of what are you doing for me kind of questions. Yeah. But there's got to be good answers.
Mm.
So switching gears a little bit back into climate and sustainability, something very near and dear to your heart, having written a book recently on the topic and arranging for the Sustainability Congress last summer in Chicago, which was a great success. One of the things that sort of ties some of this together is that research itself is becoming more intensive with the rise of AI, data centers, and everything else. Mm-hmm. And so how does the U of I maintain its level of sustainability, but despite the fact that research is going to become more carbon intensive in the future?
Oh, well, we have to work towards a carbon less intensive future. There's no question about that. Having been teaching these things for decades, there's you can take a lot of things on in life, but you can't take on the second law of thermodynamics. It's going to be there no matter what you do. So we have to move towards a low carbon economy, and the university has to model that as well, effectively and appropriately. And we have plans to do that, to move in those directions. We just working on micronuclear as an option as well, which would be perhaps as much as 25% of the load of the big data centers are going to consume a lot of. We need to worry a lot about the carbon intensity of that brave new world as well. I think one of our alums is the CEO of Bloom Energy that's part of that solution, and very interested in seeing how that lowering of the carbon intensity for data centers can start to move forward more effectively. So the Sustainability Congress, which was a great success, you were there for part of it. We had 1,700 people from 60 countries, more than 60 countries, come to Chicago. And what I'm particularly proud about is that it wasn't a litany of problem sets, right? Oh, all these things, bad, 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 bad. It was a set of solutions that provide hope and optimism to the youth. I think that's part of how we need to bring back trust and confidence in our sector, by providing optimism to the youth who want to make contributions, who may be a bit dismayed right now because they're smart, they can see things, and they know the social media waves are full of adverse commentary, etc. So I do think this is the challenge of our times, and it's right here. It's not out there anymore. When I was teaching this stuff in the 80s, you could say the jury's out, but right now we're seeing consequences, and we need to adapt and mitigate and develop new technological pathways that are not carbon intensity, with an level of urgency that. But that will lead to jobs. I'm a huge optimist. So the digital revolution is going to be part of this this whole thing. I think the renewables is going to be incredibly important. We have to be a thought leader and an action leader in all of the above, and I know our students care deeply about this, and as do I. And when you become a grandparent, you start to say, well, okay, yeah. So these issues are, and I actually prefer the word, it's a mouthful, thrivability to sustainability, because sustainability as a term has become a little politically suspect in certain quarters. And if you take its literal meaning, it means that you can preserve some status, right? Some level. It could be a miserable status that gets preserved. It could be the Blade Runner movie, like forever, if you've seen that.
Yes.
So I like the word thrivability because it implies that it's going to be a future that is going to be one to enjoy for our progeny as they come forward. So I think that's Universities like ours can play a leading role, particularly by partnering with other like institutions. So we're partnering with Brazil, we're partnering with Mexico, we're partnering in Southeast Asia, Singapore, in India, we're partnering in Europe, in significant partnerships where I would say sustainability is one of the common themes, cybersecurity is another common theme, energy utilization, healthcare delivery, inequities in healthcare outcomes, another common theme. We should be working on all of the above. And I do think that AI is going to be an important tool to assess, to take some of the sort of drudgery out of building these knowledge bases. But you still have to have the human being, the expert there as well. Have we figured all this out? We're in the thick of it. We're living in historical times. Yeah. But you are all, we're in the right place.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we can be proud of our institution and our setting.
Mm-hmm. So you alluded to U of I's plan to reach carbon neutrality. The plan is to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. What elements of this plan are you particularly excited about? And then what elements do you find maybe a little more challenging?
Well, it's non-trivial, the whole thing about, transportation, buildings, smart buildings, keeping people warm in the winter, cool in the summer. All of these things are non-trivial, but we have expertise in all of the above. It's going to be a multifaceted approach. There's no single silver bullet, I don't think. I do think, as a physicist, both of us, I do think safe nuclear is going to come back significantly, quickly, because the small modular reactors can be put up, I gather, in a few years, 3 years, and so we want to be at a leading edge of that kind of thing. We're working with a company that's got an idea of 700 of these things. So cruise ships can have them, data centers can have them, etc. So nuclear will be a part of it. Renewables is already a major part of it. The costs have come way down. The costs of renewables have come down faster than anybody was predicting 15 years ago when I was, teaching in class and stuff. So I think that's part of it. Decarbonizing, is going to be like a hallmark of the next 20 years. And there are going to be jobs in that arena that will come into the fore. And it's important that we educate the right kind of people who can drive that push forward. It's going to become increasingly obvious that we have to do it. So it may feel like we're in full reverse, but and I just hope that we don't go from crisis to crisis, that we use our engineering base, our physical understanding, our knowledge of economics and of decision making appropriately to move quickly into a lower carbon future. There's going to be a long tail of that, but we've got to get it down quickly at this stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. How do we want to intro this guy? So kind of on the global stage, to kind of get this carbon emissions down, the Paris Agreement is a landmark international treaty adopted in 2015 with the goal of limiting global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. The Trump administration has pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Kind of given this, what role does the U of I have to play in these international climate agreements like the Paris Agreement?
Well, we're not at the table for the international treaty agreements necessarily, but at the Sustainability Conference, for example, we had business meetings of the Sustainable Development Network, SDSN, which works closely with the United Nations on the so-called SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that were put forward 20 years ago or something like that have been very instrumental in leading to the 2-degree kind of outlook that you alluded to. So I think in that arena, which is very influential international partnering, we can play a significant role in convening, such as we did this last summer. In fact, we also hosted the Aspen Climate Institute this last summer. So for summer of 2025, Chicago, Illinois, was the epicenter of solutions for these kind of issues that you're talking about. We've got to continue doing that. getting the best ideas, transmitting them, writing the books as needed with the right kind of evidence-based sort of analysis that's going to be important, and working with industry and working with private sector more effectively. They need to convert the knowledge of impacts to business plans. Then, the scientific community cannot stand to one side and say, well, that's your problem. We've got to work with the business community to say, this is how you can utilize this kind of information, these kind of predictions, this kind of understanding to further your business plans that you need for continuation of your. That, I think, is coming to age. I think that's coming into play really quickly. We are convening multiple groups of foundations and business communities. I'm working closely with the World Business Chicago organization, for example, now on sustainability. So that's, they've got many thousands perhaps of companies that are all conversant with these kind of questions. They need components of their business plans. It's got to be converted to an actionable kind of approach for them, because they can't work in the abstract normally. So we got to do a better job, I think, in academia of translating the research into bite-sized pieces that can be converted quickly to effective devices, products, supplies, services that are meaningful for the business sector. That's exciting. We can lead that in this country. We can lead that in the Midwest. I really feel strongly that the Midwest has, and the capital of that is Chicago, which is in Illinois, by the way, I think, and is a place that it's got the water, the energy, the balanced economy system, the great institutions that work well together, great connectivity, digital and transportation wise, and it's maybe it's a little cheaper to raise a family and buy a house in the Midwest right now than certain other places. So we got to take the lead. It's getting back to this question of how do you lead, and I think this leadership includes partnering with the private sector significantly, the governmental sector as well, provide good advice. Partnering internationally is something I feel very strongly about. I think we've done that historically. There's a great legacy of those kind of partnerships internationally, University of Illinois. And with globalization in terms of trades and tariffs and things fraying a little bit at the edges, it's time to recommit to what I'm calling intellectual globalization, where you're problem solving and working across country and disciplinary boundaries. And that's inspiring to the youth as well. So it's all part of the same thing. How do you lift the youth up? By you don't do it by separating yourself from the action. You do it by flooding in and with solutions. Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Weather Realness, the weekly podcast about climate and weather. We are joined by University of Illinois President Tim Killeen to talk about his research in atmospheric science and his thoughts on the current state of climate science in the U.S.
So, Tim, you've had a remarkable tenure here at the University of Illinois, and I think many faculty, if I may speak on their behalf, we're very sad to see that you may be leaving us in 2027. Can you talk about a little bit your plans after stepping down?
Well, not in huge detail. I can tell you it's a subject of conversation with my wife and family. I will have been president for 12 years at that time, which is like a long time. In fact, I was Googling around or whatever, ChatGPTing around, saying, long-serving university presidents. There aren't many who've served that long. It's been a remarkable honor for me to be in this role, and we have momentum. I really think on every objective metric of the University of Illinois, we're doing well. Enrollment, philanthropy, reputation, research, quality, facilities. We're making progress on all the fronts, and doing it in a way that combines excellence and scale. So I'm very proud of that. I don't take any credit for it because my family's motto is shed the credit. Don't tell my kids that; they'd roll their eyes. But at some point it ends, right? And I really would like to be, for the transition to be dignified, graceful, no full of drama, no like pyrotechnics, etc. No will, he won't, who knows, jockeying, you know what I mean? Because you do see that in other universities. So we want a role model, grace in transition. At least I do. So help me with that. And the department can help a lot with that. But it's a long runway. It's like a year and a half when I said that, so it's kind of takes the mystique out of a little bit the transition, and the board is already starting to work up, an approach for that. Now, what am I going to do next? When people say congratulations on your retirement, I take the word congratulations. Retirement is a word I can't digest. I can't digest it. I'm just like, how could I ever stop or slow down? I just don't know how that would work. I joke, but don't take this wrong. I don't know one end of a golf stick from the other. So I have to keep working and contributing in something that I feel passionate about and important about. And I'm having some conversations about what that might be. It won't be running a huge multi-university campus, but it'll be along the lines of the kinds of things we've been emphasizing in terms of youth development, planning for the future, thrivability rather than sustainability. I think those are things I feel are important. Obviously, my family is going to be. I've got grandkids on one coast and on the other coast, so we'll see how all that works. But yeah, everybody seemed to have noticed my announcement. I was amazed. Like, okay, what's next? Just don't use the R word, because
yes,
very good.
So I'll mark you down to teach Atmos 100 when you're done. Right?
Oh, I'd love to teach Atmos 100. No, I'd have to. My lecture notes probably rusty right now, but it'd be a stretch. But yeah, I gave a seminar in the department.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then we'll get you in the physics building next. Who knows?
I gave a thank you for that, but Maddie. I gave a seminar at UIC physics department.
Oh, awesome!
Because when I was a grad student, I thought, boy, if I could ever be a physics professor, wouldn't that be a great thing? So I had this little thing, it never happened. So then my career winds on. I go into Arctic observations, satellites and stuff, and NSF, you mentioned NCAR, AGU presidency as well. And then I end up here, and I've got a professorship in UIC physics. So they wanted me to give a seminar. This was a few months ago. And I gave them like seminar of going to the Antarctic and down to the Pacific Ocean bed. And I said, but I'm only going to do it if I get a business card with Professor of Physics. I have a bright red business card, Professor of Physics. It's like coming
full circle.
Full circle back to my 18-year-old self.
Oh,
right.
Well, you have to give one at the department here. I'm sure Lance would love to have you for a colloquium.
That would be fun.
That's awesome.
We have been seeing more, as we live in the climate crisis, we have been seeing more physicists come over to climate science. So I think having some research examples, the department is really interested in that. And we've had a lot of great faculty from CleanMass who have come over. But yeah. So looking back on your tenure, what are some highlights or accomplishments that you are most proud of?
Well, I think the topic that comes to my mind is the topic of providing a world-class education at an affordable price for lots of people. It's kind of simple as that, really. I think we've done that with hard work. It's not easy to keep your costs down because every department, every college, every building, a lot of these deferred maintenance built in the 70s, but the board has been very supportive of the impetus we have to make our educational opportunity attainable. And we've grown by 25,000 students from the day I started. That's like adding another big university, right? That's probably that more students than University of Chicago has students, probably are roughly the same thing. So we've we've grown, but without any diminishment of excellence and quality. That I'm proud of. That may be hard to quantify. People will say, what's he talking about? But I'm proud of that because young people need that opportunity. And we've been able to do that, I think, over a 10-year period with a lot of challenges along the way. Oh, I'm also proud of COVID. I mean, the work that this university did for COVID, best in the world, saving lives, many, many lives, many neighbors who are alive now who would have. And we did that generously as well. We developed the IP, we gave it away to the world. It was in every school in the state of Illinois. So it allowed parents to stay working while if there was one kid sick in a classroom, everything stopped. Parents had to stop work. Test to Stay was something that was developed. So I'm proud of that response to a global crisis as well. Oh, there are lots of things I'm very, very proud of. The team that's here is remarkable. The people of the University of Illinois system are just remarkable. And so remarkable, actually, that a bunch of them have left to become presidents elsewhere. I asked my chief of staff, how many people have we lost to presidencies or provostships? She said 19. So, okay, so the president of South Carolina, president of Iowa, president of Massachusetts, flagships. So we're also a talent pool. I take that's a badge of courage, I think. Yeah, it's sad that people leave, but they're really... So the talent pool here is remarkable, and I think we've weathered a lot of issues. Budget. There was a budget deficit, a budget impasse, I would say. There was a pandemic, and now these changes of the federal landscape are very significant. But we're coming through, I think, admirably and honorably. Very proud of all of that. Yeah.
Any specific plans for the remainder of your time?
Yeah, my foot is hovering over the accelerator, not the brake. We're working hard on a lot of fronts. I think obviously AI and quantum, you all know about that. Mm-hmm. That's like once in a generation opportunity. DPI has been training like 5,000 young people to get, the kind of technical jobs of the future. That's very exciting. We're just, expanding that in Chicago. You see cranes in the air here. There's scaffolding around the Union. There's a new building. We just opened the computer building in Chicago, and there's a drug discovery pavilion going up and in UIS. So we're modernizing the physical infrastructure of the three universities. We've got three wonderful chancellors who are working well together, and they're like a formidable force, and I mean that in the most positive way, to take on the future. We are not going to slow down at all. People talk about a victory lap. I react the same way I do with the word retirement. Not for me. That's not like my style. So there'll be plenty of time to celebrate accomplishments, but there's work to be done. There's definitely work to be done. And our applications are going up again for next fall. We had another round of constrained tuition. I'm going to go to the governor's speech next week on the state budget. Our economic development efforts are proceeding. We're recruiting faculty. We got a lot of deferred maintenance to worry about. Huge amount of elderly buildings that need some work done. And then we've got to work on this trust and confidence of the public, which means we've got to be out and about, and we have to be authentic and participatory on all of these fronts. So I think that all takes energy and commitment, so I'm not going to let up personally, and my team won't either. Yeah, I know that.
Well, Tim, on that note, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for all the questions.
Tim Killeen is the president of the University of Illinois System. For those just tuning in, you're listening to Weather Realness, the podcast about weather and climate. I'm Maddie Stover.
And I'm Steve Nesbitt.
Have a weather or climate question you want us to tackle? Leave us a voicemail at 217-333-2141 or email weatherrealness@illinois.edu.